Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, Psychic Medium Angelo, joined by Mad Mike Kelleher. Hey, Mikey, how you doing?
Good, Angela. How are you?
Mikey Messier, filmmaker extraordinaire, director, actor, producer, writer. And we have a very, very special guest this evening. You may not know her, but you all know her husband. He is the menacing, evil-looking, scary. How you get any adjective you wish to describe him? They just call him Bruiser Brody, and Mrs. Barbara Goodish is with us tonight.
How. Well, thank you very much, Angelo, for having me on, and nice to talk to you, Mikey and Mike.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thanks so much, but Barbara, one of the things that we're not going to do tonight, because first of all, I don't want to do it, and you're probably sick to death of talking about it, is your husband's passing. So we're not going to discuss that at all.
Well, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's been done to nauseam, and I don't want to go there. And in fact, the title of this show tonight is called "Remembering the Man, Frank Goodish." Now we will of course talk about Bruiser Brody, but we will talk about Bruiser Brody as a separate individual because, by all accounts, Barbara, he really was.
Yes, he was. He distinguished the two. He distinguished the character he created, Bruiser Brody, and then he never lost sight of who he was, Frank Goodish. So when he left, just a quick story, when I used to drop him off at the airport, that's when you could actually go to the airport and drop people off. I would drop him off at the airport. There was me, and then there was Jeff, his son at that time, and he'd be dad, father, he'd be just regular Frank. When he walked through those doors, I could see the transformation taking place. He'd change his walk. He would a lot of times take his hair down, and he became that other character.
That had to be absolutely mesmerizing to watch. I know that I've seen pictures of Frank at home, away from the ring, with his hair pulled back, looking like a dad playing with his son, looking like a loving husband spending time with his wife. Nothing at all, outwardly sinister or overtly terrorizing about Frank Goodish. But I would dare say that Bruiser Brody put the fear of God into people. And I would have hated to run into him in a dark alley, quite frankly.
But
tell me about this man, Frank Goodish.
Well,
where did you end up? First of all, how did a soft-spoken Australian woman, by all accounts, a good, decent, normal person, end up being with a crazy, out-of-this-world wrestler? How the hell did that happen?
Well, the story, I was working in a hotel in Sydney, Australia, called the Texas Tavern. And it was just happened to be the hotel that all the wrestlers, when they went over there to do the Australia, New Zealand circuit, Larry Day, Steve Rickard, I think, was the other one, the promoters back in those days. And I just happened to be working. So I knew they would come in. Sometimes I'd work the front desk. Sometimes I would work behind the desk. This one day, I just happened to be on the front desk when he happened to check in. I had known all the guys before them because what happens is they kind of became like my brothers because there was no technology. You have to remember, what was this, 77? Oh my gosh, 1977. And
right.
The technology, there was no technology. So it would be, and it was too expensive to make toll calls back in those days, toll calls, long distance calls.
Oh, my God, sure. From Australia to the U.S.? Oh, my God.
Yeah. So it was way back in the old days when people wrote letters. So their wives and their families would be writing letters and pictures of the children, and then if I happened to be there, I would give them, they'd ask if there were any mail for room 456 or something. I would give them their mail, and they would share the pictures of their children, and they'd tell me my wife's missing me. So it was just like a family, even family back in those days. I was just, because I had no agenda, and I was not a problem because they were friends. So, like I said, I just happened to be that first day when he checked in. Well, there was about 2-3 months later, I think it was. There was nothing, just get to know people. And this one night, somebody didn't come in for the 3 to 11 shift. So I said, okay, I'll do the 3 to 11 shift. So they came back from a show outside Sydney, and my boss at those days, who owned the Texas Tavern, had another bar up the street called the Bourbon and Beef. And I just happened to be leaving, and all the guys had shown up, and they said, well, why don't you come up? Why don't you come up and have a drink with us? When you work till 11 o'clock, as you know, those hours, you don't feel like going home and being dead. That's like working a 9 to 5 job. You've got to unwind. So I said, oh, well, okay, I'll come along. Went up the road. Well, it just so happened, one by one, it was like 12 of them. I mean, the whole group that had been working. I mean, you're talking midgets to giants, because I even think Andre was there that night. I mean, there was all sorts of, you know what I mean? Because I had everybody there in the old days.
That had to be a sight that was surreal for you.
Right. You see, I guess because I've always accepted people, it doesn't matter what they look like or who they are. If they treat me nice, it doesn't, you know what I mean? I don't look at someone and say, ooh, that's what's terrible. You know how a lot of people judge people by how they appear and how they are? I only treat people how they treat me. That's all I've ever gone for in my life. If you're nice to me, I'm nice to you. If you're not nice to me, well, stay away. I don't care what you look like or anything. So between, as I said, because I had a lot of the little people came over to Australia too, and they were all just treating me with such respect. And so as it happened, just one by one, everybody got up. Oh, we're going to get a drink, didn't come back. Oh, we're going to use the bathroom, didn't come back. Well, it ended up 3 of us. There was Killer Carl Cluck, who's also passed, Frank, and myself. And then Carl gets up and leaves. And that left him and me. And we just sat and talked. And this is months after. I found out later he worked me. He told the boys that he wanted to get me by myself and come up. She'll come up if you're all there. If I asked her, she probably wouldn't come up. So he worked me. Even back then, I got worked.
Let me tell you something. I'm sure you know now. Yeah, you got worked, sister. I got news for you. You got worked good.
Oh, yeah. I got worked. I know. It was good.
A worker never stops working. Go ahead, Mike Kelleher. You have a question.
Just a quick question, Barbara. What was Frank's in-ring name at that time? Because I know he went by different names during different periods.
No, he was already Bruiser Brody at that time.
Okay.
That was because Fritz is the one that I think got him the trip over there. He was already working for Fritz back in those days. So he was already named Bruiser Brody. And if I remember, I think it was oh my gosh, I was trying to remember who gave him the name.
I think it was a WWF.
I think it was Vince Senior gave him the name.
Yeah, it sure was.
When he came in to fight Bruno in '76.
Yeah.
Is when they started calling him Bruiser Brody instead of Frank Goodish in the original WWF, Vince McMahon Sr.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing matches with Frank as Frank Goodish. That's for sure, because I have a few of them on tape, actually. But I do know the story of Vince Sr. He took great pride in giving guys creative names, and I dare say he had a pretty damn good track record. Mike Messier, in the interest of full disclosure, before we went on the air a moment ago, you and Barbara were talking about this amazing book. And so tell everybody about this book that you and Barb were talking about.
Well, it's Barbara's book. She co-wrote it with the longtime Bruiser Brody friend, and I read the book in that Barbara co-wrote in the summer of 2018. Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, but the book, as I see the title, the official title, Brody, The Triumph and Tragedy of Wrestling's Rebel. Paperback version's out. It's credited to yourself, Barbara Goodish, Larry Matizik, your co-author. Matizek, I'm sorry, a long-term friend of Bruiser, Frank, and Jim Ross does the introduction, and it's a great book. And Barbara, I told you that I had read another book that came out previous to that.
Yeah, we're not going to give that book any credibility, Mike.
Well, that's fine. I was just going to say that book had a lot of photographs. Barbara's book with Larry is more text, more of the story, I would say.
Yeah.
And
was that book difficult for you to write?
Yes, it was. That's why Larry had to really persuade me to write it. But it was very therapeutic because I could write it all down, things that I had probably blocked a little bit, that it was really good for me to write it down on paper and get it all out. Since I wrote the book, it made things a lot easier, if you know what I mean. Understanding
sure.
What happened.
Well, you also had the benefit of knowing Frank Goodish before you knew who Bruiser Brody really was.
Correct.
And that's who I'm more interested. Quite frankly, I mean, I think the world in general, certainly the world of pro wrestling, Bruiser Brody is legendary, iconic. He's a mythological figure, really, in the world of wrestling. But I want to know about Frank. I want to know about the guy. This show is called Remembering the Man. So let's talk about the man behind the myth. The guy who created this menacing, wild-haired beast called Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish.
Right, and to go back to the story I was telling you about, I met him as Frank Goodish. Bruiser Brody was never, that was something that was not even in our relationship. It was Frank Goodish. I have never been a wrestling fan. I have never seen wrestling. Like I said, people in the public eye had never been. I had, people that I knew, but it was like once before, it was the person. So I met the person and knew him as the person. And I think that sometime in life, when you meet somebody and you're friends and you're yourself first, instead of sometimes when people go out, they try to impress the other person. But when you meet somebody, and it takes a long time, and you're just yourself, I think that's what, helps a lot. I was just me. I never changed from being me. The wrestler, that was never, and I think that was all through the whole relationship and marriage. I was never married to Bruiser Brody. It was Frank Goodish.
Well, you segued right into where I wanted to go. Absolutely. It's perfect. Again, you knew Frank before you knew Bruiser. Did you see Frank's interaction with his fellow workers? Were they intimidated? Did they know Frank the person, or was he always Bruiser to the guys?
I think the one person, there's a couple of people, but the one person that knew Frank was Stan Hansen. They went to college together. They met in college in West Texas State playing football on football scholarships. So this was before either of them became who they became in their later life. It was Stan Hansen and Frank Goodish.
Was
And
that at
that-
Barbara? Was that in Texas at West Texas?
It was where, think of how many wrestlers have come out of.
I
West
was
Texas
just going to
State.
say to you, you know what?
Tully.
It's funny, Barbara, that we're going there because I just had. It's funny. I just had Johnny Mantell, Scott Casey, Manny
Oh,
Fernandez. And they all came from that West Texas, college university setting, and I thought to myself, and I said to Manny, bro, what the hell is in the water down there, man?
Yeah.
What are they doing in friggin' West Texas University that they're producing champion wrestlers like, fucking, pardon my language, but like,
Yeah.
almost dropped an F-bomb there.
That's okay.
Tully Blanchard was there.
Tully Blanchard,
The Funk,
Tito,
the
God
Funks.
almighty,
Don't
Tito
forget the Funk.
Santana, holy crap, yeah, I mean, Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk.
Yeah.
So Frank was a part of that brotherhood, and I know, and I'll tell you, Barbara, in the interest of full disclosure, Stan Hansen was a guest of mine at my father's restaurant in Camden, New Jersey, several years ago, and we got to talking about Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish, and it's funny because he never called him Bruiser; he called him Frank the entire time. I, of course, referred to him as Bruiser Brody, because let's be honest, I'm a fanboy, and I was marking out for Big Stan Hansen,
Yeah.
But,
No, Stan-
but Stan knew him well. Can you talk? Would it be okay, Barbara, if you talked about their relationship a little bit?
Oh, yes, because Stan has always, sometimes they would work for Paul Bosch in the Houston territory. And this was when we were in living in San Antonio. And, sometimes there was a plane that left Houston at 12 o'clock at night that would get into San Antonio like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'd get a phone call and say, hey, I'm getting the plane tonight, but I'm bringing a friend. Make sure you have food cooked. So I'd go pick him up, and it would be Stan. So Stan has been, I would say even today, Stan is still part of my life. He has always kept in touch. He took after Jeff's father left us. I would put him on the plane and send him to Stan's place with him and his kids and his wife, and they'd go on the magical mystery road trips. So I'm still in touch with Stan today. He's the one that has always been in touch with me it's 32 years now, and I would still classify him as a really good friend. He's always been there.
He's
Right
a
from the very
remarkable
beginning.
man. If anyone has ever had the opportunity, as I have, to sit down and have a conversation with Stan Hansen, he is incredibly smart, and again, incredibly articulate, and so full of knowledge, not only of world knowledge, but could tell you things about wrestling that you never knew.
Right.
He seemed like, and this is just my observation, Barbara, but he seemed to me, amongst all of the craziness and turmoil that you've been through, that he was the one steadfast that never left your side and always remained. Because I've seen a lot of people come into your life and leave, but Stan was always there.
Exactly. And like I said, he's always been there, and he's such a family man. Another one that knew the difference between the Larry of Stan Hansen or Stan Hansen. He is such a family man. Him and his wife, I just adore them all. I adore the whole family.
Mike Messier, you've got a question. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just going to comment that, Hansen and Brody, or Brody and Hansen, those names for wrestling fans are like peanut butter and jelly, and they really came.
Absolutely.
When people think about the American wrestlers in Japan in the early 80s, throughout the 80s, they think of Brody and Hansen, and then after that, they think of Williams and Gordy. as far as great tag teams, Steve Williams and Terry Gordy, but the path was laid down by Frank Goodish, a.k.a. Bruiser Brody, and Stan the Lariat Hansen. And
Barbara, did you, picking up on where Mikey is right now, did you have any idea how iconic, how godlike Frank was in Japan as Bruiser Brody?
He told me that I would not ever believe how it was in Japan. He said, it is so different from the States. And then I go to Japan, and he said, I just can't even explain it to you. When everything happened, I got the chance to go to Japan. They had Giant Baba took me over to Japan for a big memorial about two months after. And I thought about it, then I thought, well, this may be the only time that I get to see what he was talking about. And I did. I mean, I went over there. Stan was over there, too, at the same time. And when I went over there, me and Jeff went over there, and it was like, oh, I can't even explain it. It was just so incredible. I mean, the people, the way they treated me, the way they adored him, you know, and the memorial was just, to be in that Budokan, to be in that building and have everybody just be standing in that room with Giant Baba, and everybody, you know, they give the, what is it, the 10 bow count?
Yeah.
And everybody was just there, you know what I mean? Just
and can I tell you something? They adored him and they loved him, but he also scared the hell out of them.
Right.
Yeah.
He really did. You know, you have to remember something. You know, other than the Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki, who arguably probably the two tallest people in Japan, let's be honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, Brody and Hansen, you know, step onto their soil and enter the ring. They never saw guys as big before.
I know.
It scared the shit out of him. Let's be honest about it.
I asked him one time, I said, because you know how he put the chain, you know, he'd come into the building with the chain, pull it, you know, what is it?
Yeah.
Twirling the chain. I asked him, I said, aren't you ever scared about hitting anybody? He said, look how tall I am. Look how short they are. I don't have a problem. There's no way.
Well, people don't
my hand's up
realize
there,
that.
and I'm twirling that chain. That way down there. Don't worry about it. I will not hit anybody.
Yeah, exactly. He swung that chain way above their heads.
Right.
Way above.
It kind of worried
God,
me a little bit.
Well, he scared the shit out of the Japanese people for sure.
Oh, they would run.
Oh my God. Well, let's talk about. So you dated for a bit. So you're alone in a restaurant with him in Australia, and he finally he fesses up that he likes you, and so I'm guessing that like any other new couple, you know, you go on a few dates, you try each other out, and see if you like this guy or not, and or is he just like totally crazy, or is he just like does he just look nuts?
Yeah, but you have to remember, I didn't know the other character. I never went to a wrestling match.
True enough.
You know, so I never knew what his persona was, so to speak. All I saw was this gentle man that spoke very softly and very polite, and you know, kind of looked a little fat, but then he was neat, and as I said, had no idea of the other person, so to speak. And I never really did see that person. And then, I mean, he was over in Australia, I think, I knew him about 8 months before he came back. He came back for Christmas, and then he came back to Australia to finish the contract. Well, then one Friday night, he comes back, and he looks at me and said, well, he said, I'm going back home tomorrow. He sometimes left territories, if you know what I mean. He was not, if something went wrong. So came back and said, I'm leaving. Not to get into it, but I think you all know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
He was known for being his own man at a time when wrestling promoters had a stranglehold because there was no unions for wrestlers, but Bruiser Brody was like a one-man union because he was so powerful for box office.
Yeah, and right. And it wasn't so much he wanted his own way. He said, I know how to make money for everybody if they just let me go ahead. I know my character. I can make money for you people, but they won't listen. You know, like you just summed it up. So he came home, and Frank was always known to be a little bit of a tightwad. You know, he was very careful with his money and very tight. And
I heard that. I was going to actually ask you about that, Barbara.
And that's what everybody used to say. Oh, he's just using you. You know, he's just using you.
And
go home.
Yeah, and you know what, Barbara? In fairness to you and in fairness to Frank, I've heard stories of his stinginess, but I've also heard a lot of stories. And I want to be honest with you. I talked to a lot of people this week who knew Frank in preparing for this show. And I talked to a lot of people who said that Frank Goodish's generosity was above reproach, that he'd reach into his pocket if you got shorted on a payday and he'd make it up to you.
Yes.
And I've heard other people say that, you know, similar stories about, you know, if you were short on, you know, food money or hotel money, that he'd reach because he was a top draw. He made more than a lot of the guys did, of course, and as he should. But
and
I've
hear
heard
that from
stories
some of the
about
guys.
Frank,
yeah,
reaching into his pocket and, you know, and giving guys money. But again, there's that other side of the coin where it says that he was tight, that he was stingy, that he went into business for himself. And you're going to hear, I guess you're going to hear that, you know, you're going to hear the good with the bad.
Because you said, because the boys, sorry.
I was going to say
that
the Frank that you knew, I'm assuming was a generous, benevolent soul.
Oh, yes. And no, he'd never let the boys down. I've heard stories from some of the boys and everything, and they've told me stories about what he did do. Well, like if I go back and say when he came back that night and said, I'm sorry, I'm going home tomorrow. But then he got paid, and then on the table he put down this wad of cash, and all he said was, I'd like you to come over and join me. No promises, no nothing, just that's all he said. I would like you to come over. Well, knowing Frank, I knew that he trusted me because I could have just kept the money.
Sure.
You know, it was a nice little, I could have just, if I was that sort of person. So I know I trusted him. I knew he trusted me. Well, I couldn't just leave the next day or something. I think it took me probably a week, 10 days. I mean, I had to tie up a lot of loose ends and everything. I couldn't just walk out of the place and get on a plane the next day. So I tied up. And then about 10 days later, I came over to the States. I had to get papers and everything like that, and came over to the States. And the funny thing was, when I arrived in Los Angeles, the first person I met coming out of the airport was, what are those people? They used to meet at the airport. Oh, I can't remember their name.
Hare Krishnas?
Oh, the Hare Krishnas?
That's it. You're right.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a welcome to America, isn't it?
You got a flower.
Yeah, because that was when, you remember, you could go up and meet people right off a plane. You didn't have to wait in security. You know what I mean? You could actually meet. But then I had to get a flight into San Antonio and everything. And of course, you're on that flight getting in and think, oh, what if there's nobody to meet me? What if it's there? You know, you start going through those questions. But no,
so
he was
Barbara,
there to meet me.
Was Texas culture shock for you?
No, not really, because I'd come from Sydney, and Sydney was such a big, bustling town, and to go to San Antonio, it was not. It was smaller, so it wasn't that much of a culture shock. The one thing that was a culture shock was all your big cars. I've been used to smaller cars. You come over to America back in those days, and wow, these cars are massive. Everybody was driving those huge, big cars, which we never saw.
Barbara, Mike Kelleher has a question for you. Go ahead, Mikey.
Hey, Barbara. Actually, a couple quick ones. How old were you and Frank at this time?
Ooh, I don't even. I'm just trying to think. 77. Boy, that's a good question. Hang on. 50, 20. I think I was 28. 28. Yeah.
So you weren't living
28.
with your parents anymore by that time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, 28, 49, 28. Yeah, 28. He would have been, I think 3 years older than me. So he was 31 at that time.
Okay.
Whoa, that was a question. I had to think, oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a lot. 77. Don't want to give my age away too much.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
I don't.
If you were still living at home, did you have to talk to your parents about the fact that you were moving across the world?
No, because my mother was already my mother had already died. She died a year before. In fact, when she died, when I had already met Frank, and he had gone back to America for Christmas. So I remember he'd called me and that. So yeah, my mother was already gone, but my father. I was an adventurous type person. They were in New Zealand and I was in Australia.
Oh, okay.
So
I did.
So Frank was 31, and Frank was one of those guys that even as a young guy looked a lot older than he was. When you
He was.
Yeah, he always looked older than he was. He I guess that's the life of a wrestler. He had that world weary look, Did you think he was older? Did you know how old he was at the time, or do you think that here's this old man, robbing the cradle here?
To be perfectly honest, I never thought about it. I think because when you talk to somebody, I guess I didn't even know when ages came in. Isn't it terrible? Age has to mean so much these days. I never even thought. To be perfectly honest, I didn't even think about it. He was 46. Yeah, he was born in 46. I was 49. So no, I didn't even think about it.
So talk to me about. Well, yeah, because I saw pictures of you, and you looked like you have a baby face anyway. You look like a kid. You look like you were maybe 17, 18. You looked really young, and he looked really old. But
you know what I think it is?
I thought to myself, I wonder how much older Frank was then, Barbara.
No,
because I'm glad Mike Kelleher asked that question. Because quite frankly, I'm going to be honest with you. In all full disclosure, I was thinking about it. That he must have been at least like 10 years older than her at the time.
You know something? When men grow beards, they look so much older. You look at some young boy that has a beard, and it's like, whoa, he looks old. I think the beard puts age on, especially, women too if they've got a beard, but yeah, if they've got a beard, I think it makes them look older, and he had that big beard. I never knew him without a beard.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? You think, as a man, you think that it makes a man older when he's got a beard?
Well, you got two of the three guys here do have beards, me being one of them. You know that from my Facebook picture. Mike Kelleher. Right. Yeah, Mike Kelleher actually has a fairly full beard with some white streaks in it. He's got this. He's actually got some Bruiser Brody action going on in his beard. A couple of white streaks in the bottom of the beard. Not a stitch of hair on his head, Barbara. It's all on his face.
Okay. What do they say? They say that women like men with beards.
Mm-hmm. Did they say that?
Well, my wife certainly does.
There you go.
So let's talk about Frank as a a husband, as a dad? How long after the two of you guys, after he brings you here, does he say, "Okay, Barbara, I think it's time. Let's get hitched. Let's get married. Let's tie the knot." Whatever colloquial expression he used to you at the time.
Well, that's a good one. Well, it was like we'd lived together for quite some time. He was going to Japan. His sister and his parents were all in California at the time. We're just sitting there one night. He said, "Hey, I'm going to Japan in 2 weeks. Why don't we stop off in Vegas and get married? And then I'll go to Japan and you can go see the folks." That was it.
In Las Vegas. There you go.
In Las Vegas. So we go to Las Vegas. It's quite a funny story if you want to hear it. Yeah, we go to Las Vegas. He said, "Why don't you look up and see which is the cheapest, little wedding chapel to go to?" "I'm going to go to the gym." Okay, so I'm on the phone book looking. Yeah, right.
What a romantic.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking up the phone book, and I found this one, and it was the same one that Frank Sinatra and Mia Farrow got married in, the little white chapel.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
So it was cheap. They came to the hotel, they picked you up, they took you down to the court, then they took you to the chapel, and then they took you back to the hotel. Package deal. Okay, great. Package deal.
Nice.
I didn't even have a dress. We didn't have a ring. I had a ring that I had from my grandfather that we used that. I mean, this is what I mean. This was not what you call a, And so we get there. The witness was, they always have a witness in these chapels because you need a witness. So there's a witness. And then the little preacher that married us gave him an envelope and didn't think anything of it. They take photos and they congratulate you. And we got back to the hotel and I saw this envelope still sticking out of his pocket. I said, "You still got the envelope?" He said, "Yeah, I just figured out it was a congratulations." I said, "That was what you were meant to tip the preacher with."
Oh, that's
he
funny.
Said, "Oh." He said,
That's
"Oh."
funny.
I didn't know
my
that. I
God,
said,
that is
"Well,
funny.
I hope they do the paperwork then." He didn't even think. He had no idea, and that was it. And then he went to Japan for, I think it was a 5-week tour, and I carried on to Los Angeles and stayed with his sister, and the parents were down there at that time, so still didn't get a honeymoon,
Oh,
But
wow.
that was our life. That was just how
So when
it was.
he comes back from Japan off a tour, when is the decision made to move to Texas, or did you just live in?
No, we were living in Texas. I went straight to Texas.
Oh,
when
I
came
got you.
over
Okay.
here.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was we
So
were already in Texas.
So Los Angeles was a temporary thing. I got you.
No, Los Angeles was where his parents and his sister lived. He was living in Texas, but they were living in Los Angeles
I
at
got
the
you.
time.
So now, as far as I know, you said one son, right?
Correct.
Okay, and his name's Jeff, right?
That's correct.
Okay, now Jeff is what about? I'm thinking about 32, maybe 33 now.
No, he was married in '80, so he'll be 40 this year. Oh my God.
Oh wow! Oh, I thought he was
Yeah.
younger. Okay. Okay.
No, that's how quick time goes by. Frank has been gone 32 years this year.
Wow.
Wow.
I know.
Haven't seen
Can you
that.
believe
Oh,
that?
gee whiz. So Jeff is 40.
He'll be 40
Wow.
in November.
Hey,
I
I'm
know.
going to tell you something. He looks like his father.
He really does in the
He
face.
does,
Unbelievable.
too. He looks like his daddy. Ain't
Oh,
no
I know. The
denying that
pictures of
kid.
his eyes. Yeah, those eyes. That just, he's got his father's eyes because his father, that's why he was so good. When Frank had those eyes going, that was just go, ooh.
And
You
he's
know.
a tall young man.
Right. Not quite as tall as his dad, but very slim.
Well, Frank
get
was
into the-
6'6", right?
I think 6'5".
Oh,
I
6'5".
think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, they always put an inch on here and there. You
Those
know that.
boots made him
Yeah.
so tall. Those boots that Bruiser Brody wore in the ring probably added
Right.
2 inches.
Yeah, you got to
I would
remember
say-
something, Messier. You need to remember something. I'm 5'2", so anybody above 5'3" is tall to me.
Oh, well, you look taller on Skype, Angelo.
That's because I'm sitting down.
If I could ask a question, Barbara.
Sure, go ahead, Messier.
This is Mike Messier, Barbara. And if this is too personal a question, please, you can. I won't be offended if you don't want to answer, but
You can tell him to shut the hell up, Barbara.
most definitely.
Okay.
But the situation with you raising your son reminds me of a future guest on Wrestling with the Future, Brian Pillman Jr., who's the son of Flying Brian Pillman, another great wrestling star who passed away at a young age. And I guess with great respect to you and your situation, because I think this question, the answer you provide might help other moms in a similar boat, which is raising a child who has a celebrity father when the father passes away at an unfortunate time. How do you broach kind of educating your son about his dad? Because you have all these many hours of videotape, but it's all as the character of Bruiser Brody. There is one, 20-minute tape I've seen of kind of Frank Goodish talking about the pro wrestling business in a serious way. But when you're showing your son has all this access to these Abdullah Butcher steel cage matches, but how do you broach that side of his wrestling persona with the man that you loved as a husband and who loved your son as a father?
That's a really good question, Mikey. That's a really good question, Mike. Thank you.
Welcome.
That is. See, Jeff was 7 years old when it happened, so he really didn't know his dad. And he kind of, like anything, shut down because he came. I don't want to get into because we didn't want to talk about that, but he kind of shut down. Only the last few years is he realizing who his father was. He was too young to understand who his father was. And then what happened, except for Stan, which it wasn't Stan Malaria, it was Stan. Whenever he saw Stan, it was just his dad's friend. It wasn't a wrestler. So he never really understood exactly. It's just been maybe the last after 30, he's finally beginning to realize who his dad was and finally being able to understand, because now all his friends are coming over and talking now that his dad is more popular today than what he was back then.
Well, I
That
was
he's
just
out
going to
there.
ask you about that, as a matter of fact. In part of preparing for this interview, I went back last night, Barb, and watched Bruiser's episode of Dark Side of the Ring.
I was going,
I was just going to say, I went back last night and watched a bit of it. In fact, I will have the two men who created that series on an upcoming episode of this podcast, Wrestling with the Future, and talk to them about a few things that I want to get off my chest. But one of the things that I noticed in that episode was that Jeffrey said, and it was sad to hear him say it, but it was also illuminating, is that that other people know his father better than he does. I'm paraphrasing, but basically along those lines. When you mentioned earlier in the broadcast tonight, going to Japan for Frank's memorial from the Japanese people, and you had your son with you. And when he was there with you, did the impact of all of those people affect him? Did he realize just how famous and popular his dad was?
I really don't think he did. The thing that he liked, I mean, this is a kid. Remember, he's 7 years old. He's gone through this traumatic thing.
Yeah.
The Japanese people, I had an interpreter with me all the time when we went out. They took us to Disneyland and they took us everywhere. They had one of the office boys with Jeff. Well, the guy couldn't talk English and Jeff didn't talk Japanese, but they got on like a house on fire. Jeff thought it was great. Every time they took him to a store and he wanted something, they bought it for him. I'm saying, no, don't. I got to try get back home. I got to get these things back home in the car. So I think Jeff just thought it was great. No matter what he wanted, they bought for him. And this little guy and the two of them, they just got on like a house on fire. They went to the baseball and hit baseball. Those things
That's
you go
funny.
and the cages and everything.
Oh, batting cage.
He had,
So he appreciates. So he appreciates now. He's starting to appreciate the magnitude of his father's celebrity status and his impact and fame.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that Vice because I was going to mention it. And I'm going to tell you this. I cannot say enough about Evan and Jason, the ones that put it on. They have been the most respectful, unbelievable person. They were so good because they got on with Jeff too. Jeff has never talked about his father. He has never been on an interview. They got him. They asked him and he said, okay. It shocked me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They
sure.
got him. They made him comfortable that he actually got on the Vice show, and like you just mentioned, and he talked. He did that interview, and I could not believe it, to be honest. I just was wow. But
yeah, we're actually going to have them. They're going to be on an upcoming episode. I'm going to have both of them on the show.
That's great.
I like those guys. I like what they're doing. I like the fact, Barbara, that they do their homework, they do their research, and they're not afraid to spend time with people. No. Mike Messier is in the film business. Mike does film and television, and he'll spend a little time with his subjects, but then he has to go and write.
Right.
But it's funny, but Evan and his partner, they spend time with you and they get to know you, and they'll have dinner with you and lunch and we
drank wine together.
Yeah, exactly. And get to know who you are because let's be honest about it. Barbara is as much a part of the Frank Goodish story as Bruiser Brody is.
Right.
And if not a bigger part because you were with him every day.
And Evan still messages me right up. We just messaged each other a couple of days ago. Even today, he still keeps in touch because sometimes he might need information or contact somebody, and he'll say, and he'll message me, and I help him out if I can. And as like I said, I call them. They can be my sons. I just adore both of them.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah. And they did such a good job. I was really afraid of doing this when they first approached me way back because that was the pilot episode that they did on Frank. That's why.
Yeah, it sure was. You know what? Now that you mentioned it, you're absolutely right. That was the first episode.
Yeah, so they always come back and thank me because they did such a good job of it. And that was when they got picked up for the remainder of the
they credit that Bruiser Brody episode with the launch of the entire series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and not only they're getting to do a second season, but they're actually doing a full season this time. It's not just 6 episodes; it's a full 10 episodes. So Vice
I know
really
it should be quite interesting. I can't wait to see the one on Dr. D. David. I know David, and he's a trip. I really like. I
can't hear you, Barbara. Speak up. Speak up. I got the John Stossel here.
Yeah.
Messier being a smart ass again.
That joke only works in 2020, Angelo.
Go ahead, Mike.
I
You got a question, Mike. Go ahead.
That's
Talk
great.
to Barbara.
That's great.
I hit you with a double whammy on Stossel. Barbara, just to follow up on what I said earlier, I do want to give you personal credit because from all accounts, it seems that your son has grown up to be a fine young man and now a 40-year-old man. And I could be wrong, but does he have children of his own now? Is that true?
No, I don't think I'll ever be a grandma.
Oh, that's
No, he
okay.
doesn't.
But it seems to be that you raised a good son, and as a lot of people out there can understand, that's difficult to do as a single parent, and give yourself a lot of credit for raising a son that well like that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I guess a follow-up question that, having read your book, what I found very interesting is that Ivan Putski, Polish power Ivan Putski, if I'm not mistaken, was really a big part of the early Frank Goodish wrestling career. And for whatever reason, just when I started watching wrestling, I never would have put Ivan Putski, who was kind of this WWF mainstay, I never would have put him in this, thinking of him as a buddy to Bruiser Brody, who really, if I could say, was like the first indie darling of professional wrestling. He was the first guy, in my experience as a wrestling fan, who wasn't with Jim Crockett Promotions. He wasn't with Vern Gagne all the time. He was in and out of World Class. He definitely wasn't with Vince McMahon in the mid-'80s. But he was just as big as the Road Warriors, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. And he was doing this in the Texas promotions, in Japan, in Puerto Rico. He was doing his own thing, but putting himself on the map in such a spectacular way. But to get back to my point, could you talk about Ivan Putski a little bit and how his friendship worked with Frank?
See how it was, how Frank met Ivan. They were going to the gym together. And this is when I think Frank had been cut. He got as far as the NFL and then got he got cut from the Washington Redskins. Then he went to a little semi-pro team, the Toros or something. And in between that, he was wondering, what am I going to do? Well, he met Ivan Putski at the gym. And that's how it all began, how he ended up in wrestling. Was I think Ivan was working with Fritz or something at that time and said, well, why don't you go? Maybe wrestling, maybe that's something you could be your next career or something. And I think that's how the friendship with Ivan came. I think it was Ivan that kind of set him onto the wrestling path, if I remember correctly.
And my understanding was that Frank was basically headed for a career in pro football.
Yeah, well, that's when he was, and that's when he got cut. I mean, I've even found some of his old things when all the NFL teams were wanting him to come try out. There was one, Dallas Cowboys, and then it was the Washington Redskins. Who was the famous coach back in those days?
Vince Lombardi?
I've got
Bear Bryant?
Yeah. No, Lombardi.
Oh, Vince Lombardi.
That was the one, because there was something, it wasn't his signature, but the letter had come from him saying that we'd like to try you out, etc., and that. So
he got a letter from Vince Lombardi?
It was, I don't think, like I said, it wasn't, it was a standard letter wasn't a real signature. You know how people send things out?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a sure it wasn't a.
He was a giant among coaches.
Yeah, and this was way back in.
Considered probably among the greatest football coaches of all time, probably, right, Kelleher?
And that's why Frank, he knew that, so that's why he went to the Washington Redskins. But as he said later, he said, if I put into my tryout with the Washington Redskins as much discipline that I put into wrestling, I could have made it. But I was young and thought I had the world, thought I had the world by the hand. I got picked up by the Washington Redskins, and he said, I blew it. He actually admitted that later. He said, I thought I was that good, but you have to be very prestigious. When you go that, you got everybody else is the same as you.
Well, you know what? I have to say something, Barb. In defense of Frank's decision, had he begun a career in pro football, we may today be just talking about another guy who played football
Right.
instead of a guy who is revered and idolized around the world as one of the greatest in-ring pro wrestlers that ever put on a pair of boots and tights.
I know, and see, this is what I cannot. It amazes me, even today, talking to you three. It even amazes me how this is 2020, and he is still, like I said, he is still so remembered. I go to these events, you know, the Cauliflower Alley Club and the Professional Hall of Fame up in, in Waterloo, the Luthiers.
Oh, yeah, Waterloo, Iowa. Yeah.
Yeah, Waterloo, Iowa. I go there. I went up to Amsterdam with the original Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame when Tony Villano was running it. I know he's now running they're in a new organization.
Yeah, actually, Barb, Tony's going to be on the show in May.
Oh, I have to give him my regards. Yeah, we messaged back and forth too, because I knew Tony back then, and I love him and his wife Holly. And
well, I'll tell you what, Barbara. While I have you on the phone now, let me do this? Let me extend an invitation to you now to join Tony Villano and I on that show, if you like.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to say hi. Yeah, he was at the CA. I loved seeing him at the CAC last year. He got awarded at the CAC last year. So it was great catching up with him and everything. Yeah, he's a great guy too. But
yeah, I like Tony. I like Tony because he's a straight shooter. He's a no bullshit kind of guy. I like that. Mike Kelleher, you're chomping at the bit here. Go ahead, brother.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I just had a few questions that I wanted to throw out there. Obviously he was taken from the world way too soon. And, one of the questions I was wondering, his style of wrestling, it was probably not a style that, if he was going to have a long career, I was wondering if he had ever talked about whether he was going to change his character at all or make any, did he see what he would have to do in the future as he got older to continue in the industry?
Yes, he had already started a corporation called BAM, B-A-M, which was Brody Athletic Management. We bought Blanchard's ring. We had a ring in our garage he'd bought. What he was going to do, he was also working with a professor from Texas University, the one in UTSA in San Antonio. What they were going to do was the professor was going to write the skit and get him legitimate so he would go to the schools. What he was going to do, he was going to take the ring, set it up in a school, and do a skit about, this was when DARE, the DARE, the drug program that they have in the schools.
Sure.
He was going to do that, get a skit done about the dangers, especially for these youth, same today, back then too, about the dangers of drugs and, things. And what it was, they were going to go around the schools and it was going to be legitimized by this professor from the university because he figured out, which was true, with the character that he had, that the kids would actually be listening to him. You send authority figures into schools with youth, what do? They tune them out. They tune them out. That's just a well-known fact. As kids, and we know that too, and as adult authority, we don't listen. But you put someone like a character of Frank doing something like that, you think those kids wouldn't have listened?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? Oh, please.
And also he'd bought 45 acres with a little stream running through, out in the country, and he was going to make a boys' club so that
I heard
could
that,
go
and
to,
I
like,
was actually, you know what, Barbara? I actually heard that, and I was going to ask you about that. What's the status of that property now? Has it been sold? Do you still own it?
Oh no, it was sold a long time ago. It was
Okay.
it was gone way off.
I think
just after it happened.
When Mike Kelleher was asking your question, the thing that popped into my mind was ahead of his time.
Right.
I think that defines the style of Bruiser Brody, but I think it also gives a great deal of credence and credibility to the ingenuity and entertainment value that Frank Goodish knew existed in Bruiser Brody. The fact that he was ahead of his time and he knew it, and he clearly knew it because he was making money at that time that nobody was making, perhaps only him and Stan Hansen. Because let's be honest about it, if we have to be honest about it, and we will be, the fact of the matter is that Hansen and Brody at that time, both as a tag team and individuals, were making top dollar. They were both at the top of the card. And certainly Stan probably still has some of his wrestling money.
Oh, yeah, they definitely. But, yeah, so he had, because he knew there was going to be life after wrestling, even though he probably would have had something, well, he was always going to have something to do with it. He knew he couldn't go out and abuse his body like he was doing. He was getting older and trying to think ahead. He was a businessman trying to think ahead of what he could do, still keep wrestling. He also, which you might know too, he was also knowing that there would be one last run with the WWE. He knew that the match in those days would have been Hogan and him. He knew that, but he was waiting for the right moment till he had all his other pieces, because he knew what the score would be to go in with Hogan.
Oh, so God, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but he knew that would be one of the last, because he knew that was the match that everybody would really want. In fact, I think I saw something today. Somebody had made a poster of him and Hogan having a match.
I saw that.
Or something. Yeah, it was like,
I saw it too. They took King Kong Bundy out of WrestleMania 2's cage and put Frank Goodish, a.k.a. Bruiser Brody, in, and it looked great. Okay. Whoever did that poster, that mock poster, did an awesome job.
Yeah, it's amazing what you could do with Photoshop.
I know.
Good. Mike Kelleher, you have a question for Barbara.
Yeah, just another couple follow-ups. So, did he ever say, like, I've got 5, 10, however many more years left before I think I'll have to get out of the ring?
He didn't know the time, but he did know that he had to think ahead. No, so, yeah, he already knew the writing was on the wall because, like I said, poor Stan.
And then, what was his favorite thing to do outside of wrestling? Oh, I'm sorry?
Put his feet up. He never got a chance to do that. Probably just getting on a lawnmower, getting on a riding lawnmower, and riding along, spending time. I think his best thing in those days was spending time with his son, because you have to remember, we probably were only lucky to see him 3 months of a year. If you take all the time we were together, that was probably it, because he was on the road constantly. Yeah. I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't go to wrestling matches. I've been to maybe, I could count on one hand how many wrestling matches. The greatest one was when he was with Ric Flair in St. Louis for that hour when the Japanese were over there.
Yeah.
That was one of the matches, and it was a great match. I mean, people I know still talk about that today.
Oh, God, sure, absolutely. Barbara, I saw an interview Frank did. I guess it was probably somewhere, around 1982-ish, 81. he did an interview for a local television station, and it was a poor quality video, but because I guess it was dubbed 3 or 4 times. But he did an interview where he seemed to have quite a bit of knowledge of television production and how equipment worked, and he had it seemed to me like a keen insight for television and a appreciation for television. Did he understand how powerful TV would become in his career?
That's a good question. I know that he would save tapes, and I know because especially when he was in St. Louis with Sam Muchnick, and that was when Larry Matisak was there and Herb Simmons. So I know he went behind the scenes a lot, and I think he knew the power of TV between the interviews and the matches. He knew. Yeah, he did. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he was very interested in the makings of the TV and the tapes and everything like that, and to keep tapes and know how valuable. And they have. Look at YouTube today, how all those old tapes are appearing now on YouTube, and how powerful. Well, let's face it. Look how powerful even today. Look how powerful the TV is. How they control us. Really, when you think about it.
Yeah. Barbara, have you been contacted by World Wrestling Entertainment regarding, a real Hall of Fame induction for Frank? You're laughing. Okay,
Funny
I struck a
story.
nerve, apparently. I don't know.
No, funny story. Last year I didn't even know that he was going to in the legacy wing of the WWE. Someone had posted it on Facebook. I said, "Oh, fake news." Later on, I found out. I was not even informed. I had no knowledge on it that they were putting him in there. Fast forward to last August.
Hold on, Barbara. Hold on a second, Barb. I need you to back up. Are you telling me that he's actually in? Is that what you're saying?
In the WWE Legacy Hall of Fame, which means nothing. He is.
Well, I was going to say I'm finding out honestly, and it's a shoot.
Okay.
I'm finding out right now as you're saying this because I had no clue.
They put him in.
Didn't either.
Yeah, they announced that Bruiser Brody was in the WWE Legacy wing during the ceremony. They didn't do any type of pre-announcement. It was very odd. And I don't want to speak for Barbara, but to me, you could have really invited Barbara. You could have invited their son. You could have made it.
That was going to be my question. Why weren't you invited or contacted or approached for like a real induction?
I know, but fast forward to last August, I went to the one in Charlotte, the big event in Charlotte. They invited me up there. I met a wonderful lady, Karen McDonald, who was married to Wahoo. We bonded straight away because that's what happened to her. Wahoo also went into the WWE Legacy Hall of Fame the same time as Frank.
Yeah. Yeah.
She did not know anything either because she asked me, "Did you know?" I said, "Did you know?" No, neither of us. They didn't contact either of us. They put Wahoo, they put Frank in, they put a couple of other people in. We had no idea.
And Barb, I have to tell you that Karen, and I will tell everyone that what Barbara is saying is the absolute truth, because Karen McDaniel and I are friends. I know Karen, and she is a very outspoken. She's out there. She is a very bold woman, and she told me that story, the story you just told, and she was quite colorful in her language, and she was quite irate. She does not appreciate what they've done, not contacting her or you, quite frankly,
right.
And and has quite a bit to say. And Karen will be on the show actually next week. And
Good, yeah, she.
and I know that you know that because you and Karen talk, and I'm sure she's mentioned being on my show.
Yes.
And I just imagine.
I have to listen to that because because as I said, I know we talked about that and quite some detail up there in Charlotte. And yes, it was. Both of us. She said, "I can't believe it." I said, "No, I can't believe it either." None of us, both of us, had no idea at all. We thought that's really. She was a little more vocal than I am. I'm a little more laid back.
She's I think that's a polite way to put it, Barb. That she's a little bit more vocal. That's an understatement.
It is to me a little odd and maybe even disrespectful the way they did that. But on a positive note with WWE in regards to the legacy of your husband, Barbara, Bruiser Brody had a really nice WWE classic action figure. I want to say it came out around 2007. And it had the boots, it had the chain. For guys like myself that do collect these action figures of wrestlers, I want to give WWE credit. I'm not sure if it was, I think it was Jax or Mattel, one of the big companies that made that action figure at the time. Did you have to sign off for the licensing of that, Barbara? Are you satisfied with that action figure that came out?
Yes, they shipped some to me, and yes, I had to kind of sign off. I had to deal with them, and they were okay. It took a while because they wanted to take everything, and I was in the middle of writing the book. Well, I had to say, yeah, I can sign off on this, but I need to keep the rights. You know what I mean? To do the things that I need to do. And we worked it out, and everything was fine. Yeah, they worked with me. I have to admit that.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you maintain at least some financial interest in that? I hope.
Oh yes, they gave me a nice little fee up front, and we're still working on the royalties. And they send me the accounting every quarter, I think it is.
And that pisses me off even more, and I'll tell you why. Because if they're thoughtful enough. Well, let's be honest about it. If there's a profit involved, they're thoughtful. If they're thoughtful enough to consider your, feelings and financial interest in Bruiser Brody action figure, then why not have the same damn courtesy to consider your feelings when you induct the man into your legacy wing and you don't tell their fucking family? Pardon my language.
No, that's fine. I totally agree. This was just something that was so so underhand that, because as Karen said too, we should have been there. We should have got some sort of payment because they get payments. Everyone that goes up there, you get a payday.
There's a legacy contract, and they wine you and they dine you and they give you tickets to Mania, and it really is baffling. I mean, look, people know that this is Mike Messier again. I am very critical of WWE because, for better or for worse, they do have the legacy of all these territories that I grew up watching as a young fan.
True.
And I want to see those territories, the UWF, the Mid-Southern, the AWA, Jim Crockett. I want to see those territories honored. And people like Bruiser Brody, they should be respected. Wahoo McDaniel should be respected. And when they disrespect, whether it's for whatever reason, people like Barbara Goodish and Wahoo's widow, that upsets me as a wrestling fan, and it makes me not want to spend money on World Wrestling Entertainment products, to be honest.
Well, how do you think they feel, Mike?
Probably upset. But Barbara, I do want to ask, if I could. We know that because you do carry the legacy of your late husband, Frank Goodish, a.k.a. Bruiser Brody, but is there any other interests in life, other things, other aspects of your life apart from this? Because we know this is a big part of your life, especially when you're talking to wrestling fans. But do you have any other interests or world concerns that you would want to bring to the Wrestling with the Future podcast audience, maybe besides this?
That's a good question. Well, I do yoga and I do Tai Chi and I keep busy like that. I like music. I like going to, live music and everything. Except now there's nothing. Pretty much I'm at home. I'm kind of being careful out there, as I know we all have to be, which is like a change of the world right now. So kind of everything is kind of on hold, as we know. So everything's closed down and everything stops. So it's kind of time to, take note and just do some thinking and catch up on things you need to catch up, and know that this too shall pass.
Exactly. It's funny. I've been using that expression almost on a daily basis. And it will. But now, a question for you, Barb. Mike touched on something. The wrestling fans. You attend a fair number of conventions and signings. You do Q&A sessions at the various halls of fame, and of course, at the different WrestleCon and StarCast and that sort of thing. Do you still enjoy meeting the fans? Do you ever tire of it?
No, because they have stories, and the thing that really got me, which I couldn't believe, was I have several people coming up to me and telling me all about watching on TV and watching YouTube, and they've read the book and they just keep on. And I asked them their age, and they were not even born. These were not even born. And I said, well, that's amazing that they've picked up on his style.
Isn't that remarkable? I mean, you think about that. That is absolutely remarkable. Barbara, Mike Kelleher has a couple questions for you. Go ahead, Mikey.
No, I was just going to say, like, from Angelo and Mike Messier's perspective, they've known the wrestler Bruiser Brody forever. Okay, I was born in '77. I definitely remember as a young wrestling fan seeing some match or two, on TV, but I didn't nearly know Bruiser Brody until much later on the level that these guys, and I still probably don't compared to what these guys do, but I'm just saying there's generations of wrestling fans that, just as you mentioned, were born after he had passed.
That's because you're just a punk kid, Mike.
Oh, all right, I'll take care of you later, Angelo. But
I'm the old man here, Barbara.
So when the young fans come up and they're talking to you about your husband and everything, like, does that I don't know, what is that like? Just, I don't want to put anything out there. What do you?
No, I just think it's amazing, and just to be remembered. I mean, 32 years after his passing, and yet all these people are just, you know what I mean? They know the name, they know the style. And another thing that really gets me is when they show me tattoos of him. It's like, oh my goodness, they have their arms tattooed. Mm-hmm. Some have it on their leg. The one that really got me was a 21-year-old. I was up in Philly for that first Bruiser Brody Cup #1. We were in Philly. And this young 21-year-old, he had a picture of Frank and Abby down his arm. And it was like 21 years old.
There's a character, by the way. Another guy that I actually had the chance to sit down and have dinner with, Abdullah the Butcher. Good old Larry Shreve. I love Abby. Abby is...
Larry. Yeah, that name rings a bell.
Yeah. He is a character, brother. I'm going to tell you, he really is. Yeah.
I know. I spent a weekend, not with him, I spent a weekend. I go to a little show in outside St. Louis for Herb Simmons. They have a Bruiser Brody Memorial and Wrestling at the Chase anniversary. And this is where Abby was there one weekend, so I spent a lot of time with Abby. That's how I came to meet Dr. D, too. He was there one weekend, too, to spend a little bit of time. Last year was Killer Tim Brooks and Johnny Mantell. It was so nice catching up with all these people and spending time, especially Tim. You know,
sure.
he's not doing good.
Johnny's a good friend of the show. Johnny Mantell's a real good friend of this show. In fact, Johnny was on with me last week. I had Johnny and Manny Fernandez here, and we talked a little bit about Frank, and we talked a little bit about the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Wichita Falls, Texas. And it was great catching him. Oh, Johnny's a great friend of the show, and he's actually been on the show 3 times, Barb.
Yeah, I never can get to the Hall of Fame in Texas because it's the same weekend that Herb runs his Bruiser Brody Memorial. They're both on the same weekend. So
I got you.
I wish one of them would both have that same date. It's just a date every year that they've got booked, and it just is the same date. So, yeah, I'd love to, go see Johnny, in Texas again, but that's just one of those things that, the bookings. This year, I don't know, because everything is now getting cancelled, as we know.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike Kelleher.
I want to just make one observation and then pose a question to you. On TV, I'm going in people's attics and garages, and I just have to say, basically we tell a family story through the items we find in their house, and seeing the storage unit full of the items from Frank's career was it on a very, very deep level. It was fascinating to me. So I just wanted to let you know, that was really cool getting to see that on the Vice special. And, just throwing this out there, what would you want the world to remember about Frank?
Well, a great family man. I mean, I know this got nothing to do with wrestling or anything. Great family man. And he put his heart and soul into wrestling. His only goal was not to be the person that a lot of people think he is, because they say how hard he was to work with. That was not his main thing. He wanted to give he wanted to make money for the promoters. He definitely wanted to make money for the boys. And he just wanted to give the fans, number one, the fans, the best night of their life, so that when they left that arena, they would have to look at each other and say, is it real? It's real.
Exactly.
It's real.
Exactly.
That was a great, however much the tickets was, that was the best money that I'd spent. That was entertainment, which is what it is. And to go back, not to change the subject, what do you guys think of this next, the new wrestling organization that has come out?
AEW?
With Cody. Yeah,
AEW.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess if I could jump in, I like the fact that AEW exists simply for the fact that people need a choice. And when I say people, I mean both the fans and the wrestlers. The wrestlers need another place to work where they can say, hey, Vince, or hey, Triple H, if you're not going to pay me so much money, or if you're not going to use my creative talents as a wrestler or my ability to get over with the fans, then if I'm Matt Hardy or I'm Brody Lee or I'm Dean Ambrose, I can go be Jon Moxley somewhere else. And the fans, the fans need to have the power of their thumb to hit that remote control and say, if you're not going to entertain us, if you're not going to listen to us when we don't want to cheer for Roman Reigns or whoever you stick down our throats, we can cheer for Cody Rhodes or we can cheer for Jon Moxley somewhere else. So
absolutely.
It's why the federal government busted up monopolies in the phone, Ma Bell, 40 years ago. So I'm all for it. I don't agree with the Joey Janellas of the world, but I am thankful they haven't employed Joey Ryan. But I will say that I give
Mike.
AEW my credit.
In fairness, Mike. Let's before you go on a tangent, because I know where you're going with it. Because I know this guy, Barb. In fairness, though, they are offering a choice. Correct. Now, Barbara, Mike mentioned a name in there, Brody Lee.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you know who Brody Lee is.
No, I don't.
Well, let me tell you who Brody Lee is. The wrestler formerly known as Luke Harper.
Now I know.
Okay. Yeah. Brody
Luke
Lee.
Harper.
Yeah, he took his name directly from Bruiser Brody.
I've heard that he's been mentioned in the same name. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
And
that's
he looks remarkably like Frank. It's scary how much he looks like Frank. He's the same build, the same size, the same muscularity, the same crazy beard and wild hair. It's like watching Bruiser Brody in 2020. And I think that Brody Lee being acquired by AEW is a breath of fresh air. And I think you're going to see, if you haven't spent enough time watching him, Barbara, I highly encourage you to watch Brody Lee. I think you'll really get behind this guy, and to have your endorsement for him would be huge.
That's interesting. Yeah. I just happened to go. The AEW had one of their shows here, and Jim Ross got me tickets. So I actually saw a show of theirs, one of their first shows that was here where I live. So it was really interesting, though. I've never sat in the front row before and watched a wrestling, so I was really appreciative for Jim Ross to, get me tickets.
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
But it was different.
So, Barbara, my follow-up question to what I was saying earlier is, did you ever get any inkling that maybe Frank would have gotten Jeffrey into wrestling?
Oh, good question.
That is a good question, just because of the fact that most sons of wrestlers end up wrestling. So that is a good question. So we will never know.
Did Jeffrey ever have like an inkling or desire to follow Frank's footsteps into the ring?
No, because he blamed wrestling for taking his father away from him.
Ah, okay. Now, it's interesting. I'll tell you something interesting. I had the opportunity to speak to Flying Brian Pillman Jr., who will be on the show, as Mike Messier mentioned. But I've also had the opportunity to speak to David Benoit, Chris Benoit's son.
Oh, that's right.
And David is actually an active wrestler now. But if you see this young man, he looks exactly like his father. And that's part of his problem, is he looks like his dad, and that's a reminder to people of what his father allegedly, we have to say, allegedly did.
Yeah, I am interested. I will watch. I am going to watch the Vice episode on Chris, just because I'm interested how Evan and Jason do it. I think it'll be a very interesting episode that they're starting off the season with.
Yeah, and I think we should tell people that the episode that Barbara Goodish is referring to is actually airing tonight. In fact, in New Jersey, where I'm located, it's actually airing as we speak right now.
Oh, very, very interesting. Yeah, I know they replay it.
They replay it all the time. They're not hard to find.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can find a Dark Side of the Ring pretty much everywhere now. Of course, I want to encourage people, if they have not seen the Bruiser Brody episode, which Barbara is featured prominently in, you can go to Viceland TV, or it's actually Vice TV now, and just search your TV guide for Dark Side of the Ring, the Bruiser Brody episode, and it's there. It's up right now. Barbara, we're going to let you go, and I cannot honestly thank you enough for being with us.
Thank you,
You
Barbara.
have an open invitation anytime to join me, and I certainly hope you'll join me with Tony Villano, and that'll be in a couple of weeks. And so, again, thank you on behalf of Mike Kelleher and Mike Messier.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Barb, for being here, and I'll reach out to you in the next day or two. Thanks so much, honey.
Yes.
Appreciate you.
That's welcome. Have a great day or have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barb. Take care. Good night.
You too. Bye.
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 Wow, that was an amazing interview.
Well, she's a classy lady, Angelo, and great job of securing that interview. And
Thank you, Mike.
yeah, thank you, and really a pleasure to share this with you and Mike, and just a wonderful lady who remains true to herself, true to her truth, true to her late husband and her son, and just really a strong person to have lived such an interesting life.
Yeah. Kelleher, you brought up an interesting point there that I was surprised, quite frankly, that you didn't expand on. I saw the episode of the Bruiser Brody episode, and where they were going through Frank's storage unit. And as a guy who does that for a living, boy, I want to tell you what, I could have told a hell of a story with that.
Oh,
when you see something like that, is that like you get like this, your creative juices get crazy, or what?
I was my imagination was running pretty hard with that one, and I just had to kind of take a step back, and
I saw you do that. I'm surprised you did, because I thought you were going to go for it.
No, she deserved better than that, and so I just wanted, like, I could not at least mention it, but we were having such a good conversation, it would have totally derailed what we
Well,
had.
you know what surprises me, both of you guys, Mike and Mikey, is that I'm surprised, quite frankly, that she still has so much stuff. I thought
Well, I think
sure.
Stephanie is the one that's keeping it.
Well, I think that, first of all, as a wrestling fan, I would love to see that, exhibit somewhere in a Hall of Fame or in a museum. I mean, you're talking about, historic, wrestling artifacts, his football jersey, his helmet,
Yeah.
his boots, his, contracts, interesting to see what kind of money was printed on those contracts.
This is like seeing the instruments that musicians have that they store away and all their accoutrement.
Yeah.
This is the stuff nobody ever gets to see, and I would
and that's precisely the point, Mike Messier. That's like a treasure trove for a museum.
Well, I think what you're getting at is, we talked about these different there's more than one Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
There's several, in fact.
There's several.
Yeah.
We've talked about the different variations, and the thing that really needs to happen, and I'm not going to take any sides for any of them right now, but if you had a brick and mortar building somewhere in the United States where enough wrestling fans would come through, whether it's New York City, whether it's Full Sail University, whether it's Texas, Las Vegas, some LA, some place where enough wrestling, Jacksonville, where I'm at, enough wrestling fans would need to spend $20 a ticket to go to this Hall of Fame, this brick and mortar old school building. You would need the fans would almost need to pledge to support it, because you couldn't just expect anybody to pay for a building and get Bruiser Brody's stuff.
Well,
or
that's
Stan
part
stuff.
of the problem, Mike, is that there is an actual brick and mortar Hall of Fame in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Right.
The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, one of them, run by Johnny Mantell. But the problem is, not everybody can go to Texas.
Well, the fans. That's the thing. It needs to, and like I said, I don't want to take favorites with anybody. I'm sure the one in Wichita is great, but it needs to be a destination where people are going to circulate through. Even when the WWE had their nightclub, The World, or WWE New York, 15 years ago, great idea, great location. The rent was sky high, and they couldn't keep it up.
Yeah. Well, there are locations being scouted right now in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Chicago.
Angelo, you've got room in your basement. We can just convert your basement, right?
Go.
People can just go through the front door and come downstairs and make a little Hall of Fame in Angelo's basement.
I'm down for that.
Charge $20 like an Airbnb.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on in. Well, fellas, it's been a great episode. I want to thank both of you, Mike Messier, for joining me. It's MikeMessier.com is all things Mike. Yep. His film projects, Avalonia Film Festival, which, by the way, is on hold right now.
Let me jump in if I could, Angelo.
Sure.
The film festival is not on hold. It's scheduled for November. Hopefully everything will be cleared. My film festival has had a great website for 4 festivals prior. I put the winning films on the website anyway. So all these film festivals that are scrambling to get their websites up to par, I've been doing that from the get-go. So distancefromavalon.com. I just started my merchandise store on Amazon. So you can find Mike Messier Movie Maker on Amazon, buy a t-shirt. They're not just my face all over it. I've got different designs, inspirational quotes, and appreciate you having me on the show, Angelo. Mike, it was good talking to you, and special credit to Barbara Goodish, because what a classy lady.
Thank you, Mike. Mike Kelleher.
Yes,
Tell
sir.
everybody about Mike Kelleher in the world of Legacy List, and give your plugs, brother.
Mike Kelleher on Legacy List with Matt Paxton. You can catch us on PBS. Check your listings, because all over the country it's different days and times. But Legacy List with Matt Paxton. You can also find me on Instagram at MK333 or at Hi-Fi Mike. So shoot me a message if you want to talk about stuff. We'll talk about stuff. If you want to talk about wrestling, we'll talk about wrestling. If you want to talk about wrestling,
Mike Kelleher is the stuff guy.
That's me.
He's the stuff guy, and I'm the wrestling guy. And you can find me. You can find me on Twitter at WrestlingFuture. You can find our Facebook, facebook.com/WrestlingWithTheFuture. If you want to add me on Facebook, it's Angelo DeCipio or Wrestling with the Future. You can also go to my psychic page, which is Psychic Angelo on Facebook, and Twitter at Psychic Angelo. And you can, we don't have an Instagram yet. We were working on an Instagram when Jeff the Ref passed, our guru who knew, our Encyclopedia Britannica. I miss that guy. I really do.
Yeah, Jeff was great.
Yeah, Jeff was great. And this show, as always, is dedicated to the Ref. We dedicate all our shows to the Ref. That's what we call Remembering the Ref. And this was, he would have loved this episode. Could you imagine the questions he would have had? Oh my God.
He'd still be on the phone right now.
It would have been three-parter.
This would have been a 4-hour episode. We would have had to do a 2-parter with Jeff. But, yeah, but, Jeff, you're always with us, brother, and, always in spirit. But for Mike Kelleher, For Mike Messier, I am Psychic Medium Angelo. This is Wrestling with the Future. Join us when our next guest will be J.J. Maguire, the Music Man for WWE. He wrote all that great, amazing theme entrance that you heard. He and Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart. J.J. Maguire will be with us on Thursday night of this week. Take care, everybody. Happy wrestling. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.